everyone, my name is Kavita Gupta. Welcome to Nest Summit for Climate Week 2020. I'm so excited today because we are finally talking about women leadership in climate activism. You know, since Greta has become a poster child, we all are talking about girls and women, but how many other women can you quickly think who are the leaders, who are really movers and shakers in the climate space? Thinking hard? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. There is a little video which is going to connect you to the powerful message from women across the world.
When I was young, I fell in love with this world.
I fell in love with the silence of the desert,
the smell of the earth after rain,
the plains of South Dakota. I fell in love with the way that the world holds us.
I am a climate scientist.
I am a Palestinian Texan.
An all-around general nerd.
I am an immigrant.
An advocate.
I'm a leader.
I am a black girl from the hood who's trying to change climate policy.
When I look around today,
I see a lot of brokenness,
corruption, divisions between the haves and the have-nots,
living systems of the planet fraying.
And I feel worried about our future.
I feel grief.
I feel ashamed.
Really angry.
Heartbroken.
Numb. On good days, I feel courageous.
To me, the climate crisis
is an economic issue.
It's an immigration issue.
Spiritual issue.
A feminist issue.
A right now issue.
It's the ultimate intersectional justice issue.
I'm determined to be part of the solution because I want there to be children on this planet in 7 generations.
Because everyone has a role to play.
Because it's the right thing to do.
It's easy to imagine a future that is bleak.
I can also imagine transformation.
People rising in resilience.
100% clean energy.
Farms that sequester carbon in their soil.
A world that is inclusive. A future that works for all of us.
I am a woman.
I'm a woman.
I am leading on climate.
We are leading on climate.
Join us. Join us.
And now we have some amazing women joining us from all over the world. But first and foremost, the person I will be talking to now is someone who is my ideal, someone I follow, and someone I really, really look up to. I don't even know where to start her introduction. A businesswoman, a producer, journalist, activist. Pat Mitchell is the chair of the Women's Media Center, Sundance Institute, V-Day, Green Cross International, George Foster Peabody Awards, Acumen Fund, Skoll Fund, and I can keep on going for 30 minutes. But why don't we just have Pat and talk to her about the amazing journey in life and how she's using her platform to support all of us. Hey, Pat, I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a real privilege to be with you here. Thanks so much.
Pat, you have been the first women CEO of PBS. You curate and host TED Women. You have been using your platform to promote women across sectors. How did the climate justice movement started for you?
My journey into climate activism started really as a child, Kavita. I was raised on a small farm in South Georgia, and I got the connection very early on between good climate and good crops, and the connection between the climate emergency starting even then, and the food we had to eat. Many years later in my media career, I got the real indoctrination into climate and especially climate justice in working with the environmental pioneer, Ted Turner. Ted allowed me and worked with me to produce hundreds of hours of documentaries in the 90s. We're talking about the early 90s. Wow. On conservation, natural resource depletion, access to clean water, all the big issues, working on oceans with Jacques Cousteau and National Geographic. So I married into climate too, in that Ted's daughter, Laura Turner Seidel, a globally respected women climate leader, is my daughter-in-law. And my husband's a committed environmentalist, so we sort of live and breathe climate every day. But it wasn't until I started to make the connection between the fact that women are the most adversely impacted community of people who feel the effects and the consequences of climate change and climate crisis, and that women are also the architects of the solutions and going forward shaping a different response to climate, one that finds solutions that are just. So climate justice as a concept was introduced to me through Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland and the former UN climate envoy. Mary brought it to a group of connected women leaders, another group of women I'm privileged to work with, a cohort of women who lead across all sectors but are not climate activists necessarily. But Mary told us on this gathering, we are all climate activists, and we all bring our own individual issues and the intersectionality of all those issues and put forward then solutions that are just and sustainable.
Wow. How was it different between 90s and what you see today? You know, I mean, this is like very early activism when we still had a much bigger potential to save the earth than what we have today. I mean, look at the fires in California, what's happening in Iceland and Nordic regions with glacier. How do you see this whole thing in last 20, 30 years?
You know, 30 years ago, no one had ever actually said the term climate or global warming, but we did documentaries on global warming in 1993 and 4. Ted Turner was not only a media visionary, he also saw the impact of climate worldwide, in particular on the most vulnerable communities. And of course, it was happening then. It's just that there wasn't a lot of press and there was very little coverage. Very few films made. Now the difference is we are talking about it like this. There are books being written that we're going to talk about later in this program. There's leadership all over the world as the world now realizes we're in an existential threat. We have very few years left to solve this crisis. We can't sit back. We have to all step in to climate activism and be engaged.
Wow. This looks like decades and decades of journey, basically really just being an activist. During all this time, if you must name top 5 women whose contribution to climate change has been indispensable, who would that be and why?
Now that is a challenging question because I could talk endlessly about the women I've met all over the world who have made climate their main focus, or whatever their focus is, they work on climate. But let's just start with Christiana Figueres, who led the world toward a global agreement in Paris. It was Christiana's persistent optimism coming out of the failure and the Copenhagen conference that she was determined to get the world to a global agreement on climate. And she did, with the help of a lot of other women, too many, too numerous. They did all the behind the scenes negotiating that kept that negotiation moving forward when it could have broken down so many times. Speaking at that conference is a climate woman leader I admire tremendously, Hindu Ibrahim. Hindu comes from Chad, and she brought the indigenous voices forward at the Paris Agreement. And as a climate envoy for the UN, she continues to put the issue of indigenous people on the front burner, as does Takata Iron Eyes and Shea Batista, who I must mention as the 16 and 18-year-old climate activists who are leading the climate strikes and who have brought a whole generation of people into this struggle. And there are many, many more, including the 2 extraordinary women that are going to join us now, who have recognized that in every community, the ones especially most marginalized and vulnerable, there are women leaders, from presidents of countries to women in regional and remote communities, who are stepping forward saying, we are the victims and of the consequences of climate change, we must be the ones who shape the solutions. And women are leading the solutions everywhere.
Oh, I absolutely agree, and thank you for sharing those names. Like, those names are shaping the way we are looking at activism today, and how we're going to actually create some sort of strategies outside of it. You talked about the book, and I know that's what's coming up, but I also wanted to quickly touch base upon your amazing book, which you launched last year, Becoming a Dangerous Woman, Embracing Risk to Change the World. I love that book. I read it cover to cover. When you connect the same feeling and the same sentiments to the climate space, you know, and you met these two amazing women we would be meeting, Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson and Dr. Katherine Wilkinson. What inspired you to support them, to help them to actually come up with this book? How did you meet them, and how did you feel like, okay, this is something I really want to be part of?
Well, I can't wait to have them join us and talk to us about All We Can Save, their book. But if I just might reference why my book became a book of dangerous women, it's another climate activist who I want to be sure and mention, Jane Fonda, who at 82, you know, is still on the front lines of a climate emergency. And it was Jane who said to me, we're living in dangerous times. And I said back, in those times, dangerous times call for dangerous women, women willing to take the risk and assume the responsibility for solving the biggest global threats. And certainly that is what Ayana and Katherine and their work as climate scientists and their work with emerging leaders, that's the work that they lead, and that's the work that will lead us to just and sustainable solutions.
Well, Pat has already looped us into an amazing book, and we are very, very privileged to have these two amazing, rocking women joining us. Their book, All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for Climate Crisis. Very, very excited to have Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. She's a marine biologist, policy expert, writer, founder and CEO of Ocean Collective. Dr. Katherine Wilkinson is an author, strategist, teacher from Atlanta, and was named one of the 15 women who will save the world by Time magazine. Ayana and Katherine, it's such a pleasure having you guys. How are you guys doing?
Great, thanks for having us.
Now I have Pat, I have Ayana, I have Katherine. I mean, I have really amazing, badass women on this panel. And I think I just, since I have read Pat's book, I have just said, like, dangerous women is what I want to be. And these three amazing, dangerous women out here, I'm just thinking, what's left on climate crisis now? How can we handle all of this together? Ayana and Katherine, how did you two meet, and what inspired you to start this journey?
Do you want to start, Ayana, or do you want me to? I love that question.
Yeah.
Why don't you kick us off?
So, of all places to meet, Ayana and I actually met in the Wild West of Twitter, and then with some very helpful matchmaking by another woman leader in climate, we connected by phone and were sort of off to the races when we discovered our shared commitment to climate solutions and also building community among women who are really leading and lighting the way in this movement.
Wow. And how did you guys connect with Pat? What was the story there?
Pat and I are actually neighbors in Atlanta, but if you can believe it, we met in Oxford. We had to find our way to another continent to meet. And Pat was gracious enough to extend an invitation for me to speak at TED Women a couple of years ago. So we really got to know each other well working on that talk together.
Wow. I mean, I have seen Pat's Women's Network, and believe me, that has been one of the most connected network of women who each and every one of them are so inspiring. So I would love to know more about the book. I haven't got the chance to read it yet, but I know it's coming out. When is it releasing? When is it going to be available?
Yeah. The publication date is September 22nd. It's already available for pre-order. And we can't wait to get this into as many hands and hearts and minds as we possibly can, because it is just overflowing with beautiful wisdom. It's, scientists and policymakers and farmers, and I'm really sorry, my chickens are outside making a lot of noise right now. And all of this diverse wisdom, from like regenerative farming, which is happening outside my window, to thinking about the Green New Deal and what are the stories we need to tell, and our electricity system, and the role of art and design and culture change and the importance of narrative and journalism, and to have all of that wisdom in one book, including wisdom from Indigenous leaders as well, is just, it feels like an amazing gift to be able to offer the world in this moment when we're really, we're needing more leadership. As Katherine says, the climate crisis is a leadership crisis. That's what got us into this mess, is obviously we haven't had the right leaders. And so we were very excited to have this opportunity to shine a light on dozens of women who are leading on climate, who should all be household names and fully supported and fully funded, because their work is truly transformational. And so that is the vision of All We Can Save, is to shine a light on all the brilliance that we have and make sure that women are not left out of these solutions, because they're already leading on them, and they're not going to stop doing that work to write their own books mostly, but we thought we could sort of bring the book to them in the sense of creating and co-editing this anthology.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be a it's an inspirational book, right? Because like in your day-to-day world, you don't even know how many amazing women are really creating such amazing journeys. How did you meet these women, and like what made you decide these are the women we want to get the story? Like, what has been the process like?
I think the best metaphor is something like quilting, because there is this incredibly rich and diverse community of women working on this, working to move climate solutions forward, working to amplify the needs of climate justice and the stories, the policies, the technologies. So really, the biggest challenge for us was trying to get to a subset of this incredibly rich community of women who are leading. So we thought a lot about different topics, different geographies, different ages, racial backgrounds, academic backgrounds, really the whole kind of the whole gamut of different lenses of the kaleidoscope, so to speak, that people are bringing with them in their work. Many of these women, either Ayana or I, or both of us, had a chance to work with at one point or another. And some we actually really got to know through the process of editing the book, which is really sort of a silver lining that I think we hadn't totally anticipated, kind of the depth of relationship building in the process of bringing the book into the world.
I was just going to add to what Katherine was saying. I mean, we signed a book contract for, 65,000 words and around 20 essays, and it was just impossible to limit ourselves to that. And so it grew because we also wanted to be showing the full spectrum of climate solutions that there are out there and all of the ways that you can participate. This is not about simply marching and donating and voting, although we should certainly be doing all of those things. It's about like finding how your special skills can contribute to the climate solutions that we have. And so we wanted to show like the full spectrum of work that's being done. And so sort of 20 essays essays became 25, became 30, became 38, became 41, and our editor was like, "You're done." And so it's 41 essays, 17 poems, all these incredibly poignant quotes and original illustrations. And the book, as Katherine was describing, really is this quilt or this mosaic showing all the varied and beautiful and textured ways of contributing to this work.
Wow. Pat, has you? Yes, please.
Would you mind if I just added something that I love that Katherine and Ayana describe this process as sort of quilting, because in many ways this work in climate has been about women coming together from different perspectives, deeply listening to each other, learning, and then on their shared experiences building something. Katherine and I were privileged to be a part of this cohort of women leaders who are not climate activists, who don't write, who are not scientists, but who in one day said, let's come up with the Declaration for Climate Justice. And in that declaration, just put some principles forward that we can all agree on. And to see everyone listening to each other and hearing what it was like in their community, which is why this book, which will point us to all the many different ways that the climate emergency comes into our lives and is a part of our lives, and our responsibilities to save, to respond, is why I am so deeply excited about the introduction that Katherine and Ayana are giving us to a very, very broad journey in to the work.
Yeah. Wow. And I want to just jump onto that also, because I think you've said it so well, Pat. We want this book to be, of course, a resource for folks who have been in the climate space for a long time. But maybe more than anything, we want it to be an invitation to those who have been interested, worried, maybe grieving, angry, but to some degree on the sidelines because they haven't felt welcomed in to the climate movement before. And we sort of see all of the different essays and the poems as doorways, sort of showing one way into the work. Ayana often says we need the biggest and strongest team possible because this is the biggest challenge we've ever faced. So let's invite folks to really bring their superpowers into this movement, whatever those superpowers are. We need them.
Wow. So, Pat, you have read the book, right?
I've read excerpts from the book because I know some of the women who are contributors, so I'm familiar with some of the work. But I can't wait because these leaders, that is such a way of describing where we need to be now, Katherine. We need to be at that place where the doors are all open, where the invitation is to everyone. Come join us on this journey. None of us had the answer, although Katherine came close with Drawdown to a lot of really good answers. But we don't. We're all still looking for the right, just, and sustainable answers. We can't do it alone. For me, that's really the call to action here. Is it's this movement, solving this crisis, this global threat, is for all of us to do together. And this book points us in ways that we can do that.
So just from the excerpts, and for all three of you, if you have to name one woman who has been in this book, which really, really stood out for you, and I know it's a tricky question, it's the most difficult question, asking a parent to select one child, but if it has to be one woman you really, really want to talk about and underline the message, who would it be and what would be the message?
So for me, I felt incredibly honored that we were able to include an essay, an original essay in this collection by Sherry Mitchell, who published a book a couple of years ago that had an enormous influence on me called Sacred Instructions. And Sherry is one of these remarkable people who wears so many hats. She's a lawyer and a teacher, and she works on Indigenous land rights issues. She is from Maine, and Sherry just brings this incredible depth of wisdom that is frankly, deeply unusual. And there's a part of her essay that Ayana and I both really love, where she talks about two concepts in her community, Mama Bezu and Ala Bezu, which mean paying attention to every individual person having enough to thrive and live their lives, and also paying attention to everyone having enough, and not just human beings, but all beings that we share this community of our planet with. So I'm really excited for a lot more people to get to know Sherry and learn from her in All We Can Save.
Sort of my answer to this question changes depending on the moment when I'm asked. So, because I love them all for different reasons, but in this particular moment, the one that's coming to mind for me is actually the final essay in the book, the last one, which is written by Christine Nieves Rodriguez, who lived through Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Her community was totally devastated. And out of those ruins and downed trees, I mean, she describes it as like there was not one leaf left after the storm had passed. And help did not come from the government, and they had to figure out what to do. And her essay is titled "Community is Our Best Chance." I think that's right. Mm-hmm. Community is our best chance. And that is one of the core themes of the book, that this is not a book about individual heroes. This is a book about what is possible together. And in community and in expanding circles of community, and obviously expanding levels of government as well. And her essay of how her community came together and everyone contributed whatever they had, and they have built a way to be resilient to future storms. They have built a way to support each other, and to figure out what it might look like to thrive in this world where the climate has very much already changed. And my personal mantra is to build community around solutions, and climate solutions in particular. And so I was just so glad that we were able to include her essay and her story, because I think we often imagine climate solutions as either, requiring a lot of technology or requiring massive government intervention, but there's so much we can do to prepare at the community level to restore ecosystems locally, to transition to renewable energy at a local level. And her essay just pulls all of those threads together in such an incredible way.
Wow. That's really inspirational. Like, now you built it up so beautifully. I'm just so looking forward to reading the story. Pat, for you?
With all due respect to the individual women climate leaders everywhere who have given us the message clearly, it is all of our individual responsibilities to be engaged. I have to go with Ayana's thoughts here, because we can't solve this, no one individual, and it will be, in my opinion, and so this is where I place my trust, the global community of women who will step forward and who will together find the solutions to this and many other crises.
Yeah. So there are so many solutions offered.
And that's something that's echoed in.
Go ahead, Ayana, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add that, what Pat just said is echoed in the title. We had such a hard time figuring out how we could possibly put a name to this diverse and many-faceted collection. And the inspiration came from a stanza of this Adrienne Rich poem called Natural Resources, which Katherine can probably quote off the top of her head for us. But if you think about the 4 words, all we can save, each of those words is so meaningful, right? And we can no longer save it all. So much has already been lost, but who are we to give up on the rest, right? This is not over yet. And so that is sort of the energy that we wanted to bring to the book. And the we is really important in that title, just as much as the save.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will quote it because we love it so much. And it's the epigraph of the book. And the closing stanza of that poem is, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." And there's another line of Adrienne Rich's that we use at the closing of the book, which is that there must be those among whom we can sit down and weep and still be counted as warriors. And that's really the kind of kindred circle that Ayana and I want to help build in the world. It's the kind of kindred circle Pat builds, and I have been lucky enough to be a part of. And to that end, we really wanted the book not just to be a reflection of community, but a catalyst for more community building. So we've designed what we're calling All We Can Save circles, which will kick off the week of October 5th. So small groups, self-organized, who want to get together virtually or socially distanced and make their way through the wisdom of the book over 10 weeks this fall. We know how hungry people are for more generous dialogue about the climate crisis and what we can do, and who are also really hungry for connection. And we have to build that relational web as strongly as we possibly can, just as Christine's essay suggests. It's our best chance.
Wow. So September 22nd, during Climate Week, we are exactly on the time to have the book. And October 5th, you said, right, for the circle. That is what I'm super excited about, because I definitely want to join that circle. And so for all the amazing women out there, whether you think you are a climate activist, you don't think you are a climate activist, October 5th, and that circle can help you to find your other women soulmates in the same space. Before we go to an amazing poem from the book, and we are very, very excited to have the poet actually reciting her work. My last question, this is such a tricky time. It's an election year time. It's going to redefine it's just how, especially for climate, how things are going to move forward. Do you guys have any call for action individually which you want to underline or want to pass it as your last thought?
I guess I would say, Katherine and I really sprinted to finish this book before the election. We started curating the essays after Christmas at the end of December. We submitted the draft in April and then did revisions for a few months. And now the book is coming out. It's been a 9-month cycle to birth this collection. And we wanted to make sure that it came out before the election, because this could not be a more important election for climate in the United States when we think about climate policy, certainly at the federal level, but all the way down to, city councils and other local positions. And so to the extent that this book can contribute to that discourse around what it means to be, as Kate Knuth says in her essay in our book, a climate citizen, and really take your role as both a citizen and someone who is contributing to climate solutions seriously at the same time. I've been embracing the hashtag Vote Climate, because I feel like that is something that people aren't thinking about enough, is what is at stake for the future of climate policy at all levels of government in the United States in this election. So that's another way in which this book, I think, really meets this moment.
Yeah, and I think we should have Pat's bracelet a little higher, which is all about vote. Just vote.
Right. I would just like to add to that climate citizen is what we all really must be. And to quote Mary Robinson, she always says about climate activism and climate justice, make it personal. do something every day, and especially vote, that makes it personal. But also the one thing that I believe All We Can Save and the work of these two extraordinary women and all the other climate leaders point us to the opportunity we have as women to envision a very different kind of future and move towards it strategically and, most importantly, together. We can't be dangerous from the sidelines, but we can solve this together.
Yeah. Voting this year is about so much more than one election cycle, so much more than one term in the White House or one term in Senate or in Congress. This is really a moment because of the crossroads that we are sitting at, truly a crossroads of peril and possibility. We really have to think about voting not just for our own lives, which are certainly at stake here, but for future generations. This is a moment to vote, bringing the spirit of wanting to be a good ancestor to the ballot box. And I'll also just share as we close that we are really excited to carry this work forward with the All We Can Save project, which is launching the same day as the book, September 22nd, which will be a home for this work of community building, engagement, education, and ultimately, we hope, an award for women climate leaders to fund them at the level that they need to do their most powerful work in the world. Too much good work is happening as a side hustle, and it's time for that work to be center stage. And that takes resources, and Ayana and I are deeply committed to making those resources more available to more women in the space.
Wow. Thank you so much, each one of you. You guys are such powerful women, and actually, apart from being just yourself such an inspiring stories, bringing more and more amazing women at the front line. So I personally, and for Climate Week, thank you so much for doing such an amazing work. And we would be going and hearing one of the poems from the book, Being Human, but I wanted to thank you so much before we move to Naima. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you, Ayana, so much. September 22nd, I'm looking forward to the book. This was such an amazing, inspiring conversation. And just to continue before we go, I have amazing Naima Penniman. Naima is a multidimensional artist, activist, healer, grower, and educator committed to planetary health and community resilience. She's the program director at Soul Fire Farm. She has written a poem, Being Human, which she will be reciting for us. And you can read that poem in the book releasing on September 22nd. Thank you. Over to you, Naima.
I wonder if the sun debates dawn some mornings, not wanting to rise out of bed from under that down feather horizon. If the sky grows tired of being everywhere at once, adapting to the mood swings of the weather. If clouds drift off, trying to hold themselves together, make deals with gravity to loiter a little longer. I wonder if rain is scared of falling, if she has trouble letting go, if snowflakes get sick of being perfect all the time, each one trying to be, one of a kind. I wonder if stars wish upon themselves before they die, if they need to teach their young how to shine. I wonder if shadows long to just for once feel the sun. If they get lost in the shuffle, not knowing where they're from, I wonder if sunrise and sunset respect each other, even though they've never met. If storms have regrets, if volcanoes get stressed, if compost believes in life after death. I wonder if breath ever thinks of suicide, if the wind just wants to sit still sometimes, and watch the world pass him by. If smoke was born knowing how to rise, if rainbows get shy backstage, not sure if their colors match right. I wonder if lightning needs an alarm clock to know when to crack, if rivers ever stop and think of turning back, if streams meet the wrong sea and their whole lives run off track. I wonder if the snow wants to be black, if the soil thinks she's too dark, if butterflies want to cover up their marks, if rocks are self-conscious of their weight, if mountains are insecure of their strength. I wonder if waves get discouraged crawling up the sand, only to be pulled back again to where they began, if land feels stepped upon, if sand feels insignificant, if trees need to question their lovers to know where they stand, if branches waver at the crossroads unsure of which way to grow, if leaves understand they're replaceable and they still dance when the wind blows. I wonder where the moon goes when she is in hiding. I want to find her there and watch the ocean spin from a distance, listen to her, stir in her sleep. Effort give way to existence.